I'm here with my global national colleagues to talk about the biggest political stories of the year. Joining us is Michael Couture, Abigail Bimman, and David Akin. Abigail, let's start with you. Biggest story on the Hill for you this year?
For me, it was the trip to India, and I know we're going all the way back to February, but I was on that trip as a reporter, and it was fascinating to watch it play out, all of the missteps, all of the problems with that trip. So the big ones being the choice to wear Indian attire, which did not go well. I remember somebody in India saying, you know, we Indians don't wear Indian clothing this often, and then watching it play out back home, which was even worse. And of course, the invitation of Jaspal Atwal, the convicted attempted murderer, photographed at an event on the trip, and watching the way the Inner Circle handled that trip on the trip very poorly. But bigger than that, the reverberations and the consequences of that trip, we've seen it play out all through the year with the Daniel Jean testimony, and just this month we have a new report about that trip. So that trip was the first time that we saw a dent in Trudeau's numbers. We saw some polling showing the Conservatives surpassing the Liberals in polling, and it was the trip that stuck in terms of making an impression.
Well, and David, why do you think that trip stuck? What about it made it that watershed?
Well, there also wasn't much news. I mean, there wasn't much business element. And we've traveled with prime ministers, past and present, and there's often a cultural mix to these trips as well as a business component.
This one was heavy on culture.
This one was heavy on culture.
And not unnecessary, completely unnecessary.
You saw the Conservatives take it up in the House of Commons as Justin Trudeau's India vacation. And that, I think, also reverberated with Canadians, not only the costume, but what did you do? He brought his family over, and they were also suitably decked out. So I think it struck completely the wrong tone, and Trudeau wore it.
And PMO knew it, right? I mean, we saw at the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner where you had Trudeau get up there and make fun of it and say, India trip? What India trip? We didn't go to India this year. Internally, they knew this was a massive misstep.
Tense is important. They knew by the time of the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner, and they know now, but on the trip, it just went from bad to worse, and they couldn't right that ship.
And certainly a trip they'd like to forget, but some things they'd like to remember. NAFTA, I know, was a big topic for you, Mike.
Yeah,
and a big story this year.
And I mean, what do we want to call it? NAFTA Light, USMCA, CUMC,
NAFTA 2.0,
whatever it is. Yes, that was finally something that Trudeau can look at and go, I got a deal done with Trump. Can you believe this, right? Because nobody thought, I mean, no matter what the Conservatives want to say, and they think that they could have gotten a better deal with him, they believe they could have. Trudeau and the Liberals understood that trying to deal with Donald Trump and what he wanted to do and what he was trying to do, and still to this day, I've spoken to people who were in the room, and they said they were taken aback because they would show up and look across the table and say, so we agree on this, but we just saw a tweet from your boss saying you don't agree on this. And the people across the table from the American side would go, we need to get back to this here. So the fact that they could get it done, I think, is going to be a huge feather in the cap for Trudeau. He's going to campaign on that. The problem is we still have the steel and aluminum tariffs hanging over. Everybody thought that they were going to get resolved with the resolution of NAFTA. They haven't. It's a massive dent on our economy right now. Trump loves them. He thinks that they're great, that they are a huge benefit to the Americans. How Trudeau will get those tariffs taken off is going to be the biggest hill he'll have to climb next year.
And another question on it, David. Congress is still a big question mark here because it's a very different Congress coming in, and they haven't signed off on it.
It is, and we've already seen several existing members of the Congress on both sides of the aisle say they don't like the new NAFTA or the USMCA. So that's going to be a big problem. I think on the steel and aluminum tariffs, though, I think Trudeau is betting, and the reason they didn't tie the two things together, they think they got a easy case in court, and it is in a couple of different jurisdictions. They'll win there, and Trump won't succeed there. But NAFTA is all politics, and our side and Trump have to actually now politic to the new Congress.
And speaking of the Congress issue, I mean, when you just saw earlier in December that terrible photo op in the Oval Office with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that just degenerated. The Democrats...
I love that kind of transparency in photo ops.
Yeah.
Give me more photo ops like that. I mean, too many boring photo ops.
But I mean, the fact that the Democrats now want to make sure that they turn what Trump sees as a win into a loss, USMCA, NAFTA Light, NAFTA 2.0 might be where they want to do it.
Well, Abigail, if Congress starts to become difficult on that, is that a political issue for the Liberals here at home, or can people differentiate?
I think people can differentiate because the Liberals have been so consistent in their messaging about what a good deal this is. I think for me, the reason that NAFTA is one of the most important and biggest stories of the year, partially just the fact that it took so long to roll out. I spoke to lots of people who don't normally follow politics so closely, who were paying attention and saying, hey, what does this actually mean? We have free trade with the United States, right? It really made a lot of people pay more attention, want to know the details.
And it's a big surprise for a lot of Canadians that America might not be a friend.
And when people started to realize this actually might break and fall apart, and hey, what does that mean for us now in our average, in daily life? I think that's why that story stood out.
We've never had to worry about the Americans, right? It's never been...
Or not as much, yeah.
Yeah, it's always been, okay, you know what? Sometimes we don't get along with them, that's fine. Trump has changed the game completely. Now nobody knows where the U.S. stands. Forget on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis, on a daily basis.
Well, and speaking of game changers, for Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, a pretty big game changer with some of the provinces, David, which I know relates to your top story of the year.
So I want to start with New Brunswick 10 years ago, if you don't mind. I'll get into that this way. 10 years ago in New Brunswick.
David Akin's history is always good.
Yes, and I love numbers. I'm a numbers guy. 10 years ago, 95% of New Brunswickers in an election voted Liberal or Conservative. This fall, barely 70% did. The others, a couple of new parties, Greens, People's sort of Alliance Party. Let's go next door to Quebec. There's a brand new party. The CAQ is in charge there. The Liberal Party had their worst showing ever, and the Parti Québécois, they're not even an official party anymore. Let's keep going west to Ontario. The Liberal Party of Ontario, one of the strongest machines in Western democratic history, it's no longer an official party. Voters, right, all three provinces said, I'm done with the status quo, I want something new. Let's look ahead to next spring in Alberta. 4 years ago, Albertans said, to heck with the status quo, throw out the PCs, and chose the NDP for the first time. And it looks like the NDP may be on their way out with another brand new party, Jason Kenney's United Conservatives. This volatile electorate, an electorate that's ready to say, I want to try something completely different. We have seen some polling that suggests the Greens are on the rise. That is a net bad for Justin Trudeau's Liberals in the year ahead. We've seen little Maxime Bernier's new party. That may be a net bad for the Andrew Scheer's Conservatives. It's up for grabs in this year. Voters are ready to move.
Abigail, where do you think that populism is it populism, I should say, is driving it? Where's the factor coming that's changing the way people vote?
I think it goes back to what David says in terms of people who are ready to try something new. And in terms of populism, it's people who are just looking for those other alternatives. Maybe we don't quite yet know exactly how far that will go or what is the meat of those other alternatives. But it's people paying more attention to a new alternative.
Mike, we have a few seconds left. Your thoughts? You've been watching the provinces for a long time.
Yeah.
How significant of a shift are we seeing?
I think the fact that now Justin Trudeau is sitting around the table where he doesn't have a lot of receptive ears anymore is going to be an issue for him. The fact that when he first dreamed up of, I'm going to hold these meetings again with the provinces and territories, and it'll be sunny ways and we're going to have a great time. Well, I think he's really seen now why Stephen Harper never did it before, because it is difficult, it is hard to get consensus around this table, and I think in 2019 that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Will he try and play himself off of Premier Doug Ford, or is he going to try and go around campaigning saying, look, I'm the antidote to every one of your premiers, or does he have, a receptive audience there?
A bit of a reality check for sure. Thank you to all of our reporters for joining us with their top stories of the year.